So we got some brand new Panasonic GH6 Leaked Specs, and well, it's shaping up to be a pretty impressive camera, but there's one problem. They're not changing the autofocus.
No! God, please, no!
So before you freak out completely, remember these are still just leaked specs and nothing is 100%, but these are very good source specs coming from 4/3 Rumors. They rank this as a FT4, meaning they do have really good sources for this, but it's not an FT5, meaning that they consider it fact. Now quickly, before I go into detail about these new leaked specs, there is some things that we do know about this camera that's coming from Panasonic itself. So we know that it will be capable of shooting DCI 4K 60 at 10-bit 422. That is very impressive, and supposedly it can do that at an unlimited rate, which again is very impressive and something that professionals will really appreciate. So making that possible, they do have a new sensor and a new engine, and it seems to be giving it a lot of horsepower because this will also be capable of 4K 120 10-bit. I'm guessing not 422, but still that's very impressive. And also 5.7K 10-bit up to 60 frames per second. So far that all sounds very good, and that is what we have officially announced from Panasonic. Now to get into these new leaked specs. So like I said from the onset and the big headline, they're still gonna have that depth and defocus autofocusing system, which tends to give us that pulsing that happens with the Panasonic cameras, and it's something that people have been begging them to move away from for a very long time. Now they did say that this would be 5 times faster than the GH5, and also they would have some AI elements to add to this autofocusing system. So maybe it's gonna be good enough and somehow Panasonic finally cracked the code for contrast autofocus, but I'm not extremely confident in that, and honestly, I'm not sure anybody should be extremely confident in that. We've heard from a long time now, especially with their, full frame line, that hey, this is getting better and better and this is faster and faster, but it still seems to have the same problems that the GH5 suffered from, even if it is slightly faster and better. I wonder if that pulsing system will still actually affect the footage. Now, while this obviously sounds like disappointing news, it is best to wait until it gets into the hands of reviewers and get some real-world testing before we can make our final verdict on whether this is actually going to be a bad thing. But one thing that is definitely not a bad thing is the other specs that came out of this leak. So according to 4/3 Rumors, they have completely eliminated the rolling shutter with the GH6. So what does that mean exactly, to say that they've completely eliminated it? Well, usually that would mean a global shutter. Now they did not say that this would have a global shutter, and honestly I would be extremely surprised if this does. But what I'm guessing that they mean by this is essentially it will have a fast enough readout speed that any resemblance of rolling shutter is pretty much going to be imperceivable. Essentially the Z9 as well, I think, is the R3 and the A1 for sure. They barely have any rolling shutter issues and they can shoot very fast. Now, will this camera be quite as fast as those? It's hard to say, but this is a micro 4/3 sensor, so they can get some pretty fast stuff out of it. I know with the new OM digital camera that's supposed to be coming out, the OM1, they say they are capable of 120 frames per second. So that seems pretty insane for photography specs. Now, will that translate over to this new GH6? It is hard to say. I know that the GH6 typically is a little bit more focused on the video side, and that shows in their marketing material with all the things that they released was all about video. But with the video specs being this impressive and with the fast processor that has to power that type of specs, I do expect, that's a lot of specs there, I do anticipate that the photography specs will be great as well. If I had to guess, maybe it will be on par with the new OM1, so possibly 120 frames per second. That would be great if that is the case. But since we were talking about photo specs and them saying that they have eliminated the rolling shutter, 4/3 Rumors also thinks that it is possible that this will not have a mechanical shutter whatsoever. And if they did completely eliminate the rolling shutter, well, there's not necessarily a reason for it to have one. And the benefit of them not having one is that you would have one less thing that can go wrong in your camera. So in theory, it should make this more durable. But that is all the new specs we have leaked at this time. This camera will be announced very soon, so we won't have long to wait before we know the whole story. But drop in the comment section below and let me know, what are you thinking about this camera so far based upon the specs that we do know and these new leaked specs? Are you pretty disappointed that they're not changing the contrast-based autofocus, or do you think maybe Panasonic has finally cracked the code and this will actually work out? Let me know all of that in the comments below. If you've liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And until next time, peace.